Welcome back to Inside the Pylon, a college football podcast about the Midwest region of the country. My name is Ryan Sadkoviak, joined as always by Clinton Boring. We are also very pleased tonight to be joined by a special guest, Tyler Tachman, the Iowa University Hawkeyes beat writer for the Des Moines Register. Will be joining us tonight as we talk some Iowa football as we start our fall preview series here as the calendar turns into July. Tyler, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. How about you guys?
Doing great, doing great. Clinton, how are you?
I'm great, man. Had a pretty productive day at work. Kids went down early, so that made my life a little more easy tonight. And Tyler, I appreciate you being patient with that. As I don't know if you have kids or not, but sometimes bedtime can go a little unpredictable. But tonight it went pretty smooth.
And I basically am just a big kid, so I gotta focus on getting myself into bed tonight. So
Oh, I get that. I get that. I take care of myself. I can barely take care of myself. So Tyler is our first guest joining us as we kind of start this 18, 19 part if we're counting Notre Dame series, previewing all of these teams in the Big Ten heading into the 2024 season. Not going live tonight. I'm trying a little something to see if this helps my internet at all. So you'll have to catch these in the podcast feed, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your shows at Inside the Podcast.
Oh, did Ryan disappear already?
we lost them.
All right. Well, we have talked pretty highly about Iowa to start. Tyler, we're both big fans of how the season's been. There's obviously been a big change this year with the offensive coordinator as Ryan starts to poke back in here. But we've been pretty big fans thus far of Iowa. We have a question later to talk about our takes, but been pretty upbeat about them. So our first question we were going to kind of dive in tonight is we have a new offensive coordinator for Iowa, Tim Lester, and kind of what you're seeing as you go through this turn and through spring and now in summer. What is this new offense going to look like as we head into 2024?
I think that's kind of the big mystery right now heading into the season is, we on the beat haven't had a ton of opportunity to see what it looks like. There was an open practice in spring, but for what that was worth, Deacon Hill was basically the QB1 at that point, and now he's no longer with the program. So it's been kind of trying to collect clues of what it could look like, and Tim Lester is kind of taking the Shanahan system, which obviously has had success in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan. And I guess another thing that has stood out up to this point, just from what things that we've been hearing, is just a lot of pre-snap motion, a lot of eye candy, a lot of things to try to get the defense just maybe their eyes looking the wrong direction or just a step behind. So I think it's going to be interesting just because we're all just kind of in the wait and see mode, and like we kind of just need to see it for our own eyes. Like guys can say as much as they want of how good the offense is looking at this point, but it doesn't really matter a whole lot until I feel like we kind of see that come to fruition or not on the field.
I guess I was kind of baffled when we did our spring preview on Iowa. We tried to dive in as deep as we could about last year and then touched a little bit on the upcoming year that motion has been added to the Iowa offense. I was like, what? There wasn't much of a part of the past. And then we did a little rivalry series and briefly at the beginning of the summer and dug into some of that. And I was like, Ryan, my statement that Iowa was running a 100-year-old offense because they scored the same points 100 years ago as they averaged this year. So we got motion. I heard a little bit of like shotgun and pistol in there. So it's got me excited. But the one thing we saw with Dabo last year when Garrett Riley came in was Dabo kind of not forced him, but led him to run the Dabo or the Clemson offense. So how's Kirk Ferentz? This is kind of tying in with that first question here. How's Kirk Ferentz going to be here? Is he going to give him the full reign, or is he going to kind of have a mix, or what are we going to see there?
Yeah, well, when I guess you talked a little bit about it there, but I think the word that seems to come to my mind at this point is just feels like maybe Iowa's offense is a little more modernized, and like the RPO is another thing that kind of Tim Lester brings to the table. Still kind of TBD on like how that is going to look with Cade McNamara back there, given that you probably want to limit the hits he's taking and, putting him in vulnerable type situations. But during the, hiring process, Kirk Ferentz was pretty upfront, like he still wants to play complementary football. So don't expect Iowa to be like USC, just slinging the ball down the field. They're not going to like totally abandon what has worked. But it seems like from the information we've heard from Kirk Ferentz, from Tim Lester, that Kirk Ferentz has been receptive on Tim Lester kind of taking the reins of the offense, and I think that has been a really encouraging sign, just because it just felt like there needed kind of a fresh take, new eyes, new perspective on the offense, with all the frustration and just kind of toxicity there was around with Brian Ferentz running the offense. It felt like they're just kind of there needed to be a new chapter, a new page turned. It feels like up to that point that has held true, but again, it's one of those points where we can speculate all we want as we speak in July, but it's like, how much is Tim Lester really going to, how much is he really going to be able to put his own stamp on the offense? That's just, we're just going to kind of have to wait and see until the fall to really get a true gauge of that.
Yeah, and I mean, Lester had 3 straight seasons as the head coach of Western Michigan, where his offense ranked in the top 35 nationally. And then he coached David Blau in 2016 when he had a 3,352-yard season. So he can open up this offense a little bit. I am as a Big Ten lifer, having grown up in Ohio and still live here, I'm eager to see what this Iowa changes. Ryan, now that we got you back in, did you have anything to add to the rest of the first question? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
We just kept spinning it, man. We were good.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, that was weird. At least we got that out of the way 15 seconds in. That was good.
If healthy and playing this capabilities,
that's good. That's
Cade
fantastic.
McNamara
And it looks like we're still recording, so that's good news.
No,
I just want to kind of parlay that into the second question. So it sounds like
addition of Brendan
the word on the
Sullivan
street
was
sounds like
massive
McNamara's
for
been
Iowa,
cleared.
just because of last season Iowa got into
Does
such trouble
reading the
with
tea leaves,
Cade
Tyler,
went
does it
down,
sound like
throwing Beacon
he's
Hill
going to
in there, and it
be
just
the
was
for
so
sure number one
inexperienced,
guy?
and
Does it sound
the
like there's
quarterback
going to be
position
a
was a
battle
total
with him and
disaster.
Brendan
But
Sullivan in the
being able to
spring? How do
bring
you
in a
kind of
guy
foresee this
who
playing out
has
here if you're
had
pulling out your crystal
experience
ball?
at the Big Ten level, has had some success at the Big Ten level, as at worst a safety net to Cade McNamara, is really good for Iowa. And on top of that, I just think that the competition, like when you have competition in a room, that just makes everyone better. And even if Brendan Sullivan isn't starting, if it's Cade McNamara, the fact that Cade's knowing that he has someone kind of right on his tail pushing him, if he is, not necessarily playing at the level he should, I think that just is going to help him in general. And because that's something they didn't really have last season with Cade, just with the inexperience and injuries behind him. So I would expect Cade to be Iowa's starter if he is able to, continue. He's healthy, on the right track. But see what Brendan Sullivan brings. If he outplays Cade McNamara in the fall, then hey, I wouldn't be a total shock to see him out there either.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it might allow
I guess
Iowa
just
to be a
building
little
off
bit
that,
more aggressive
and
with Cade
this
McNamara
is
because
true
last
regardless of who's
season,
starting. Again, assuming both are healthy,
behind
just
Cade McNamara,
having
it just felt like so
both of
much
them
of the
knowing that
season
you
was
have
just
two
hanging in the
college
balance of
quarterbacks
his
who've
ability
had
to stay
success
healthy.
at
And
this
like
level in this
he had a
conference,
hiccup
and
leading up to
knowing
the
that
season as well that
you
was
you
non
have that
ACL
kind of safety
related,
blanket.
where
Do you think
it was
that's
a
going to kind
quad
of change how
issue,
Iowa calls
and
games at
it
all,
just
knowing
felt
that
like
it's not
things were
like
just
a,
kind of the
hey
whole
man, we
offense
really
was
got to do
basically
something to
teetering
shelter
on
this
his
guy because if we
ability
lose him,
to
we're
stay healthy. And then
kind of
obviously he
in
has
a
a
tough spot
season-ending
here.
injury, and then just things just totally kind of fell off the rails from there. But it might allow you just to be a little bit more aggressive with him, but also just the fact that like it just offers stability to the offense, that you feel like even if Cade is not in there, you have someone that is capable of just being like an average Big Ten quarterback, which is really all that Iowa needs. It's not like they need a top tier guy. Just the fact of having someone back there that can make the simple throws, make the easy plays and easy reads, which is really something that they lacked last season after Cade went out.
Certainly. I don't know how much you have had exposure with Brendan Sullivan, but I have an inkling who your answer is going to be, but maybe it's not. Which quarterback do you think gives them the best chance to win in 2024? Let's operate that, we still have a bit of a competition here. Is there one quarterback that you think gives them the better shot to win?
I think, well, actually, first, so when Brendan Sullivan committed to Iowa, I basically went back, watched almost every snap he took at Northwestern just to like get a feel for the type of players. And I will add on to what I feel like his value is to Iowa is that in the last two seasons, he didn't begin this season as Northwestern starter, but he made spot starts in each of those seasons, which I think is notable because he could be in that same type of situation again with Iowa this season. Say if Cade runs into another injury hurdle or something unforeseen like that. So I think that makes him even more valuable as a transfer. But I think Cade gives Iowa the best chance to win because of his passing ability, his arm strength. Sullivan, based on the film that I've watched, he creates plays with his legs really well, very mobile. The arm strength is a little bit kind of hit and miss. Like I wouldn't describe him as like a pure passer or anything like that. I think the experience that Cade has with Michigan, like some people forget, like he won a Big Ten championship with Michigan. He took Michigan to the college football playoffs. Like this is a guy that has played at a very high level of college football, and you can make your arguments about is the guys helping, doing around the guys around him that were really helping him get there. But like he'll have help on the defensive side at Iowa this season. So I would say I feel like at this point in time that Cade would give Iowa the best chance to win.
Yeah, it could be, you mentioned Sullivan's legs. Like we see it all the time as we come across in college football. You have some of that mobility aspect. Maybe Lester gets a package in there with him in the red zone and, gets a little more dynamic component to help improve their red zone this year as far as efficiency and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the mobility aspect of it from Iowa's quarterback is something that they've like really lacked. When you look at Spencer Petras, when you look at Cade McNamara and then Deacon Hill, there just has not been mobility really. That's something that has been severely lacking, and Iowa has seemed to pivot to being more willing to bringing that type of a skill set in. They have James Reeser, a rising freshman, who is a kind of dual threat guy, and then bringing in Brendan Sullivan, and then also Marco Linez, whose first season with the program was last season. He's another guy who his legs are a threat. So when you talk about maybe Iowa being more accepting to guys that are fit into more of a modern offense, it feels like they are more willing to kind of change recently. So. Luke Lachey is one guy that just kind of jumps to the top of the list, and he He was off to a pretty good start last season.
So with
season-ending injury really
again,
early
obviously
on, but he's a guy that
health being
he
kind
could
of
have gone to the
the
NFL
qualifier
draft and
here,
been,
with what we're going
been
to
a maybe
assume is
day
improved
2
quarterback
pick
play off
this
of last
past year.
season.
So
Is
he's a guy
there
that
a
you feel
guy or
really
guys on
confident
this
about.
offense
I
that
was
you
running
feel
back
like
room is also
are
really
primed to
good,
break out,
and
or who
part
could
of the
benefit
thing
most from kind of having
with
that
last
improved
season
quarterback
was
play?
that there was just so much of a non-existent passing attack that it just made it so easy to stack the box and stop the running game. But if the passing game's able to open some stuff up for the running game, the Iowa's running back room is loaded. They have Leshaun Williams, who had his most productive college season last year. They have Caleb Johnson, who really burst on the scene as a freshman, kind of was up and down a little bit last season. But then also Jazzy and Patterson and Kamari Moulton, two other guys that you feel pretty good about in the room. So Iowa's tight end and running back rooms, those are pretty far and away the strongest rooms on the offense. And those are one that I would feel confident in trying to lean heavy on as you try to get the offense some momentum into the season.
And then I had a quick question off of that. Ryan and I did some digging, and I had a trivia question for him a while ago about, I think it was, what did we say, Ryan? 2014 was Iowa's last 1,000-yard receiver, maybe. Is there anybody we see on the team this year that could push maybe towards that number? Just a true receiver. I know Lachey might be able to push to that, but a true wide receiver?
Yeah, that's another, just when you talk about Iowa's kind of offensive struggles the last few seasons, receiver has been one of those areas as well. There's a couple guys, I would say one being Caleb Brown, Ohio State transfer. So he got off to a really slow start last season. There was a lot of hype around him, but toward the back end of the season, he really kind of validated why there was so much optimism around him. He's a guy I think could get there. Now, he was just recently arrested, so there are some potential legal hurdles to go through. In all likelihood, we haven't heard Kirk Ferentz talk about this yet, but it would seem to be maybe a 1 or 2 game suspension. If it's 1, then he would be back for the Iowa State game. If it was 2 or more, then obviously that would be a big loss if he's not able to play against Iowa State. But we're so that might factor in his ability to get to 1,000 yards. Another guy, Seth Anderson, a Charleston Southern transfer. He was another guy that kind of just showed flashes of what he could do last season in his first season with the program, but just really, what really hurt him was just a lack of quarterback play and just the offense as a whole. But he's another guy that is definitely, the talent level is there. I think it's just kind of a matter of getting him the ball in space and kind of letting him play make.
I'm glad you brought up Lachey, because I think what gets kind of lost in the talk about Iowa's offense last year was not only the quarterback injury, but Lachey missed most of the season, and then you had Eric All missing almost the entire season with injury too. So you have these extenuating circumstances, and despite all of that, we're talking about a team that
be even better than last
was a
season, which is kind of scary to think about.
Phantom fair catch, if you will, away from going 11-1 last year, and a large part of that was because of just an incredible defensive performance last year. And
you lose Joe Evans,
aside from the loss of Cooper
who were
DeJean to the
multiple-year
NFL, they're pretty much
starters, really
running it back with
productive guys.
nearly
I was
the
gonna have
entire
to kind
same
of fill up the
roster.
gaps, in terms
Do
of
you
production
expect there
but,
to be any
you have your
drop-off
two
from last
starting
year's
safeties
exceptional
coming back.
unit, or do you
Xavier
think this is a
Wampa
unit
was
that can be even better
really
than it was
highly
last
touted
year?
guy from Iowa. He's a guy that I think can break out this season, along with Quinn Schulte. Then you have at the cornerback, Jamari Harris, a really experienced guy. And then there's kind of some healthy competition for that other starting cornerback spot. And then it would be a disservice to not talk about the linebackers. You have Jay Higgins, who is arguably the best linebacker returning in college football this season. And then Nick Jackson, who they were just a phenomenal duo last season. And really, there's not much reason to think why they're not, the best, if not close to the best, linebacking duo in the country.
Yeah, I was checking again today. Between the two last year, 281 tackles combined. And
Yeah.
that's a lot of work, man. Now, I mean, does that more show that they were able to get through holes to make plays based on the D-line, giving them holes to get through? Or was this more of a thing that people were getting through the D-line, pushing them back, and getting to that second level a little more?
The D line, if I had to say what was like the weakest position group defensively last season, it was the defensive line. It was just they had some good games. It was just kind of inconsistent. But I mean, Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson are just monsters. Like dudes are just wrecking balls. High IQ. They play really well off of each other. And the other thing that is worth really shedding some light on is the fact that Iowa's defensive coaching staff is just so good. Like you talk about Phil Parker, what he's been able to do. He finally kind of got his flowers winning the Broyles Award last season. And then the linebackers coach, Seth Wallace, he does a great job when you look at some of the guys that he's produced, like Jack Campbell, Seth Benson. He's done a phenomenal job. And then Kelvin Bell with the defensive line, Lucas Van Ness, the guys that they've produced. So it's just a really good system they have, and it's just such a contrast with the offense because the offense is it just feels so kind of at some points disjointed, and there's so much toxicity and kind of negativity around it, and the defense is just totally the exact opposite, where it's just a machine. It just feels like Phil Parker and those guys just do such a great job of developing, and that's something that you can pretty much count on them having every single year.
I go back not too many years ago as the resident Ohio State fan on this show when I believe JT Barrett was picked off 4 times in that trip to Kinnick after they had the massive comeback from Penn State. So Ohio State fans have been on the side of feeling that wrath of the Iowa defense.
Yeah, and there was a game or a couple 2-3 years ago. Michael Penix Jr. when he was at Indiana, Riley Moss just had a crazy game against him. And obviously, Michael Penix went on to Washington, and now with the Falcons. But.
Yeah. Excuse me if we missed that. Did we bring up Sebastian Castro as well?
No. Oh, I did. Yeah, I don't. That's like the thing is like Iowa's defense is so stacked. Like I just totally forget about him. But he is a true lightning in a bottle. Like he just makes. He's a really hard hitter, athletic, just flies around the field. He had a tackle last season that just kind of sticks in my mind where it was Braylon Allen, who's obviously just like a really physical running back. They were both just going full speed right at each other, and Castro just leveled him, just flattened him basically. But he can be, I think, maybe one of the most important players on Iowa's defense because he wreaks havoc. He just creates, he's just kind of wreaks just total weird stuff going on defensively, whether that be in the run game, pass game. He's versatile. So yeah, he's another guy that is just, I think could have a really big year for Iowa.
Yeah. And you were talking about the hit on Allen. If I was gonna say, I remember correctly, he was the 3rd leading tackler, I think, last year on the team, 67 tackles, somewhere near the top. So he's an elite piece for that defense. Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
There's a handful of guys that maybe on the defensive line, just in general,
you're fine.
can kind of take increased roles.
Mentioning Joe Evans and his loss, you had 13 and a half tackles for a loss and 9.5 sacks last year. Is there
he's just a physical specimen,
a player,
really
either a younger guy coming up
strong.
now or someone, who was, more of a spot guy last year, stepping up, taking a bigger role
Brian
that you
Allen's
envision, not necessarily equating his production, but kind of stepping into kind of that go-to, 3rd and long, we need a guy to make a play type of person.
I would say probably the defensive line, production-wise, but also just Logan Lee and Joe Evans were just really good leaders. So Iowa's going to need to on that defensive line, get some of those guys in there, taking bigger steps up as leaders to fill that type of role as well. But there's a handful of guys that you can look at and kind of say, well, if they can make a step or if they can make a jump. So I think there's a lot of guys that have the potential to do that for sure. But I think Y.A. Black is a guy that doesn't probably get talked about as much as he should. He's a real disruptor on the defensive line, a returning starter. So he's a guy I think on that line that could really be the anchor for that unit.
And before we if we go to not leave the defensive ball side of the ball too quick here, we did our recruiting episode last Thursday, Tyler. So I wonder, do you have any insight? And I'm looking here at 24/7. I don't see a commitment yet, but hopefully I get his name right here. Iose Epinesa. I know there's some ties with previous family here. Is there any update? Are we leaning in Iowa here, or what's the update on him?
I think right now it's just kind of the wait and see. He is obviously a very highly touted guy on the defensive line. He's an Iowa legacy recruit. His dad played at Iowa. His brother, AJ Epinesa, who's now in the NFL, played at Iowa. And his brother, his other brother, is currently on Iowa's roster. So lots of ties to Iowa with the family. But the thing that, stands out with him is like Iowa does such a good job of like bringing in overlooked guys and turning them into just like really productive defensive players. Like when you look at someone like Jay Higgins, like Iowa was his only Power 5 offer, and now he's going to be arguably the best linebacker, in the country entering the season. But when I was able to get some of that top tier talent, that's when it gets like, when you can sprinkle in maybe one or two of those guys to already the development that they're able to do, that just elevates the defense all the more. When you look at like Xavier Wampa, who is a highly touted guy, like Iowa doesn't need to necessarily land all these 4 and 5 star guys because they do such a good job of developing. But when they're able to kind of sprinkle one or two of those guys in, that those guys can really turn into stars on their defense.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So as we kind of start kind of getting towards the end here, I want to go a little big picture and turn back to the offense. And if we're sitting here in, I'm trying to do math in my head, 5 months, it's December, it's right around time of the Big Ten championship game, and we're talking about Iowa is more or less the same exact team last year, where they're just an unbelievable defense and special teams unit, but the offense is just putrid, just not good at all. And I'm talking like maybe not nearly as bad as last year, but still kind of in the hundreds in all these statistical categories. At what point does this conversation turn to, is this a Kirk Ferentz problem, or does he have a little bit more cachet, a little bit more grace than that to kind of withstand that?
To get its footing and to be able to, this offseason, guys have been learning a new offense. They've been installing stuff. So this is really from, the ground up, trying to work in a new system. But on the other hand, I think there will be a little bit of heat turned up. I mean, Kirk Ferentz, isn't a young guy. We know at some point he's not going to be Iowa's coach anymore. He's going to retire. We don't know when that's going to be. You would think it might be in the next handful of years, but I do think that there will be criticism if it's another really bad offensive year. More fingers will no longer be pointed at offensive coordinator, and they'll start to be even more so looking at Kirk Ferentz. Yeah, it was a really kind of weird situation because at the time, the athletic director was actually an interim, Beth Getz. She hadn't even been hired as the
Do you get the
full-time
sense
athletic director.
that
So
there's
that was
any
like
sort of
a
hard
huge
feelings between
statement move.
himself
Like
and the administration with
she hadn't
how
been at the
everything kind of
University of
played out with
Iowa
his
for a
son
long
last year, where
time.
they more or less,
But that was a
the
big
athletic
decision.
director
Also,
comes
just
out
because it
towards the end
came
of the season and just says, look,
during
we're
the
not even
season,
going to do
they
this song
didn't
and
wait
dance.
till
He's just
after
not
the
coming
season or
back
anything
last year,
like
and kind of
that.
took that
So it's
decision
kind of
out
a
of his
big
hands
statement on
almost.
her end. And basically, she was operating as if she was the full-time athletic director. So it took some stones to do it. She
Mm.
made the decision, and then she has eventually been named the full-time athletic director. So she has that full-time title now. I mean, basically what they've said publicly is there's not any hard feelings or anything. It's what's being felt behind closed doors, I guess, can be left up to kind of your imagination. So that's something that we necessarily haven't been given a full window into. I guess it wouldn't be difficult to see Kirk Ferentz being upset with how things went down, because that's just a really difficult situation when you look at it's his son and it's an interim athletic director and it happened during the season, and just a hard situation all around. So, but I will give credit. Kirk Ferentz just did a great job publicly handling everything. Like he never uh, he never blasted anyone. He never really showed his hand one way or the other. So I do give him credit in a really tough situation where his family was involved. He handled everything really well publicly.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. However, the flip side of this coin, talking about Iowa's offense, is even if there's a
No,
modest
I do.
improvement this
I
year,
definitely agree with that. I
it
think there's going to
it
be
could be
some
a really
dominoes
good
that are
team
going
if
to have to
we're
fall into
particularly
place.
if we're
But
expecting this defense
I
to
would definitely
bare
not
minimum
stock in
hold serve
Iowa
with
being
what they
the
did
dark
last
horse
year,
to
but
make the
even take a
college
step
football
forward.
playoff. And the
We've
12-team playoff
kind of
really
talked a couple
does
of times on
benefit a
this
team like
podcast that
Iowa, who,
we're buying stock in Iowa this year,
it's a
and we
big
think that they
ask for
could be a
them to make
playoff
the
dark horse
14
this year
playoff,
if they
but
get,
a
again,
12-team
just
expanded
modest
playoff really
offensive
helps
improvement, and they're
them
just not even
just kind
average,
of
just slightly below
keep in the
average.
national picture, because
Does
it's
that feel like an ambitious take,
just
or
a
could
lot
you
more
see a path for
realistic for them
this?
to make that. But you look at last season, Iowa, and Ryan, I think you touched on this briefly, like without a invalid fair catch call, Iowa would have been 11-1 at the end of the regular season with how bad the offense was. So you look at Iowa being in the college football playoff conversation. Had it been a 12-team playoff, even at 10-2, if you take into account that Minnesota game, so you feel like you got a lot of guys on defense returning. If Tim Lester can just get that offense off the ground a little bit, it definitely feels like an Iowa team that could make some noise nationally and put themselves in the college
Oh
football
yeah.
playoff picture. And on top of that, their schedule, even in the new landscape of the Big Ten, isn't terrible. They don't play Oregon, they don't play USC, they don't play Penn State, and they don't play Michigan. Ohio State is kind of far and away the most challenging game on their schedule. They also get Washington at Kinnick Stadium, which there's some change obviously in their program, but Iowa State, UCLA, Wisconsin, they're all winnable games for Iowa. And you feel like, again, with everything coming back, with the way the schedule is kind of put into place, I definitely would. I definitely don't think it's unrealistic for them to be in the conversation for the playoff.
Yeah, that was about my next point. So great minds think alike there. I was going to talk about the schedule. I was looking over it today. The one I was really looking at is if we're thinking playoff dark horse, and Iowa's almost there. Honestly, a game I look forward to at the end of every year is the Nebraska game. So you're going to have an end of the season against Nebraska. Could be the game where maybe Nebraska is fighting for their get over 500 win. Maybe they're 8 or 9. We'll see. But that could also be a game that Iowa really needs to push themselves into that 12-team playoff. And I'm excited to see where this Iowa offense not only will be, but, kind of side tangent with Nebraska is where Dylan Raiola is going to be in Matt Rule year 2 and the battle and the importance of what this game might mean.
Credit to Matt Rule because he's done a really good job. It seems like of just bringing in some positive energy into the program, but look, I mean, part of what makes that rivalry Iowa Nebraska tick in football wise is just the timing of the game, right? The fact that it's the last game of the season on Black Friday. The last 2 years, that game has had implications, postseason implications. 2 seasons ago, Iowa, if they beat Nebraska at Kinnick Stadium, they would have gone to the Big Ten championship. Nebraska spoiled that. Last season, Nebraska was playing with its bowl game hopes on the line. Iowa won that. So I definitely think it's a realistic scenario in which maybe for one or both teams there could be some type of postseason implications in that matchup.
And then when we talk about playoffs, now that we have the 12-teamer, and Ryan and I have kind of talked about this a little bit with Penn State, and maybe this is a slightly different scenario, but as we look at a fan base and the media, and we're at this 12-team playoff, we see the elite defense every year. What's kind of the expectation? Let's say, is it 1 out of every 5, 2 out of every 5 years, Iowa should be making this 12-team playoff, and then obviously in 2 years, the 14-team playoff?
Yeah, I think it's realistic to expect some type of run every few seasons. I think it might be a little lofty to expect Iowa to be a consistent team in the playoff, but every 3, 4, 5 years, I think that's something that Iowa fans would want to see, and at least should just like stay in the national picture. That's why I feel like the playoff is so beneficial for a program like Iowa, who is head and shoulders above a lot of other Power 5 programs, but isn't necessarily at that elite level. The 12-team and expanded playoff gives them the opportunity to stay in that national picture. And when you talk about recruiting and being on that stage and playing those big time games, and I just for a program like Iowa, you also mentioned Penn State, some of those programs that have been kind of knocking on the door of the playoff but not necessarily there. This I feel like it benefits them as much as anyone else.
Certainly.
To wrap us up tonight, Tyler, I'm not going to put you on the spot and give me a record prediction for Iowa this year.
Obvious is just offense.
I want to phrase it. I want to kind of hash it this way. If we're for Iowa to kind of meet those goals, that 10-2, 11-1 range, 9-3 range, to be kind of in that conversation to get into the back half of that big move the 12-team college football playoff, or even challenge for a Big Ten title game berth.
So good.
What needs to go right for the Hawkeyes to be in that position this year?
Something about them where they were just able to find ways to win, and being able to replicate that this season. That's part of the reason they were 10-2 in the regular season last year, is just their ability to pull out games kind of improbably. If you look at that Nebraska game, it just basically perfectly summed up their regular season, where Drew Stevens, the starting kicker, got pulled. And then you have Marshall Meter, who hadn't attempted a kicking game all season. He came and knocked in the game winner as time expired. They had something about him. And the fact they have a lot of guys back from last season's team, gives reason to believe that they will be comfortable in those type games again this season. So I think offense, and then being able to kind of close the deal late in games and make those clutch plays, those are going to be, in my eyes, the two kind of wild cards in being able to make some noise this season.
Certainly. I say, Ryan, if you don't have anything else to add with it, I had the one for fun question, so I don't want to let Tyler leave without asking that. So one more. All right. So, Tyler, Ryan and I are pretty big foodies, especially in the world of pizza. So we wanted to do something fun at the end of each of these fall previews and ask each person, so you on this episode, what is the best pizza place on or around Iowa's campus?
I would say Wigan Penn. Yeah, I would say Wigan Penn. There's probably also an argument for the Airliner, which is kind of right in the heart of Iowa City, but yeah, I'd have to go with Wigan Penn.
Is there a particular pizza you like to get from there?
I'm a pretty just like traditional like cheese guy. I don't like to go too crazy with it. So but I will say, and some people might not like this, but I like dipping my pizza in ranch. I don't know if you guys feel strongly about that, but yeah, I do like ranch with just about everything. So especially including so.
I will say the one that I typically go more ranch is sometimes a frozen pizza because they just lack that little extra bit of flavor. Or if I've ordered somewhere and there's just not enough sauce, like I don't need like ounces and ounces of sauce. But if your pizza's a little dry and need a little extra juice there, I'll do a little dip in ranch. Certainly.
Okay. I respect it.
A true Midwesterner.
I think part of my idea was this. I want to make a little document of this and keep track of these because Ryan and I think we would. I don't know about this fall, but in the future, we would love to get out to watch a game at least once a year and check out some of these college towns, maybe do a little on-site, on-scene things and talk with the fans and people around. And of course, we want to check out and do a live pizza review while we're there. So you guys helping us out with that, we really appreciate that.
Little Dave Portnoy action.
Absolutely, man. I used to
invite everyone to the rules.
Yeah, and just get in there and try it out. What do you got going on there, Ryan?
Yeah, find me on X, I guess is what the young folks call it now. At Tyler_T15. And then just kind of in,
Tyler, before we get you out of here,
mode right now.
My chair is just like, listen, man, there's some weird noises going on in this basement down here. Before we get you out of here tonight, Tyler, let the people know where they can find you and what you're working on here over the next 4 to 6 weeks as we get ready for fall camp.
Have some stuff going with that, but yeah, just kind of chomping at the bit for things to get rolling. Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
No, I just want to say thank you, Tyler, for joining us. We really appreciate your input and your insight. As Ryan said, we're really excited for Iowa's season, and
we'll be on the lookout for that because we're excited. We're ready to get into the content. We're ready
everything's going for you.
To get this football season rolling here. Tyler, we really appreciate you joining us this evening, helping us kick off our fall preview series. Oh, there we go. Cool, man. Clinton, any parting words, Mr. Clinton? All right, y'all. Everyone, thanks for joining us tonight. We will be back later this week with Matt Shelton as we talk Northwestern. Stop it.